Today I'm going to reveal the secret to painting a summer meadow just like this, without having to paint every single blade of grass. So I'm starting off by wetting the whole of the paper. I've got my paper taped down to a board. It's the back of a picture frame. I've taped it down with some low adhesive builder's tape. Now the colour I'm using there is phthalo blue, and I've had a touch of white to it. Jackson's titanium white, you can see them there on the table. That's a number 14 brush, and the paper is Sea White of Brighton 350 GSM, which is one that I really like practicing on. Added some water there and dragged it across, so we've got a slight gradation in the sky. There's my source photo. This is a photo I took on Midsummer's Day. Went out for a walk in the local countryside, and I thought this would make a good painting. And you'll see when it comes back up that I'm simplifying the scene. I've obviously changed it to a vertical scene rather than horizontal. And the idea when trying to capture a scene is not to recreate exactly what you see in front of you. You've got to try to simplify it. So we'll talk about that as we go along. So one of the things that I did simplify was the sky. You can see that I've not attempted to put in any of the clouds. Okay, I'm trying to get a roughly level horizon. It's not crucial, but it's good to have it roughly horizontal. I'm just spattering a bit of yellow paint onto the grass and then allow it all to dry. So the colours that I'm using today are phthalo blue and azo yellow, both by Michael Harding. When you mix blue and yellow together, obviously you get green, and I wanted a nice bright acidic green. Now you can see the finished painting there, so you can see what I'm trying to achieve. I've got a fairly stiff brush here. This is a brush that I use in my acrylic painting. I think it's actually designed for oils. It's very stiff. And this is a good brush to use if you want to do this spatter technique. You can see that I'm protecting the sky with a piece of scrap paper, and I'm also using that to test the spatter on. So you need to get your paint consistency watery enough to leave the brush, but not too watery that you get drips like I got there in the top left. If you do get a drip, you can mop it up like I did, but then you end up with a white spot. So it might be better to just work it in with a soft brush. Anyway, I'm not too concerned because I'll be putting a lot of spatter on here, and little problems like that will disappear into the mass. Now I've mixed up a bluey green, and I am actually painting some blades of grass there with a rigger brush. Obviously I'm not going to paint every single blade of grass in the whole field, but as you come nearer to the front of the image, you do see more detail. So you can see on the source there, we can actually see individual blades, and that's the effect I'm trying to achieve. So I've still got my rigger, I've still got the green, the bluey green, and I'm using the side of the rigger as a kind of dry brush technique. The paper's not necessarily perfectly dry, but it's dry enough to do this. And I'm effectively painting rough stripes, horizontal stripes, across the landscape along the top. You can see how I'm holding the brush. I'm almost trying to keep the brush parallel to the paper so that I'm using the side bristles and getting these lines scratched onto the paper. And you can see every so often as I load the brush, I test how watery it is on the scrap paper. I don't want to use it too watery because I'll get very thick lines. I want broken lines. So now I'm adding some extra dark details into the little clumps of grass that we've got in the foreground. And this is where we have the most detail visible to the viewer. So I've got rid of it, but I'm actually referencing the source that you saw before to see where the dark areas are. And they just look like splodges of blue-green. And that's what they look like on the photo. And it will all become clear at the end of the painting when the viewer looks at it. There's the source again. And you can see right in the centre there's a clump of a dark mass. It's a clump of grass. And so that's what I'm painting. Back to some spatter. So you will use quite a lot of paint on this technique. You need to keep squeezing out fresh paint, mixing it up, watering it down very slightly and then spattering. Got a little drip there. Try to extract it delicately this time instead of pressing down. Seemed to do the trick. So continually mixing up colours, mostly yellow along the top, working down to a mid-green in the centre of the painting, and then darker greeny blue at the bottom. Okay, now I've switched back to the rigger brush and I'm actually painting some details on here. And these details are of course the flowers that you can see in the foreground. Now I'm not going to paint every single one, and I'm not going to attempt to paint individual petals. They are basically just little U-shapes with the rigger. And as we zoom in, you can see there's a lot of little splash marks, tide marks, which are all contributing to make it look like a grassy field with some flowers in it. As you zoom in more and more, it's almost abstract. Well, it is abstract, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm trying to get an abstracted version of a field of yellow flowers, buttercups they're called in Britain. Now I've got a green mix, and with the rigger I'm just dragging down from each flower head to give it a blade of grass to sit on. It's not crucial, but it does help with the realism. Right, now let's take away the shield. That's okay, there's a little bit of spatter gone up the middle, but that's fine because, well, that's fortunate in some ways. We've got some trees and bushes on the horizon line. I've gone back to the side of the rigger brush with a fairly dry mix, not too dry. I'm getting these broken lines. I'm scraping it on the side of the brush, and these obviously represent the leaves of the trees and the bushes in the distance. So as you can see, I am almost horizontal with the brush. And I'm doing it on both sides, and that little middle section where the spatter is fine, because that looks like grass growing up above the field line of the distance. So once I've got the dry part of the trees in, I then switch to a slightly wetter mix. I'm still using the side of the brush, but now it's wetter. As you can see, it's not broken lines, it's more like little washes. And then I've mixed up my dark value, my blue-green value, and this is acting as the shadows at the bottom of the trees and the bushes. And this will hopefully make it look like a pretty convincing tree line. Now I'm not copying the exact shapes. I'm basically going for squares and random shapes with an occasional line coming out from it to look like a branch or a shadow. And again, you can look at your source to help you in this part. There's a little bit of negative painting going on as well. Now I'm going to join up all these dark areas. always a good idea to join the dark shapes together if you can. Makes it much more convincing. I'm removing the tape and we'll see what we've got, and I'm pretty happy with that. We've got a nice sky, very plain. I deliberately left out the clouds. I want to concentrate on the field and the tree line, which I think is pretty effective. Just a few shapes of greens and dark greens, and then the spatters, the green and yellow spots, and then the blades of grass in the very, very foreground, and a few flowers. And that's enough detail, we don't need to put any more than that on. Now, if you enjoyed this splatter technique, I did something similar when I painted this experimental tree, so I'll hopefully see you in that video.